All right, hi everyone. Welcome back from morning tea. I hope it was nice. I was too nervous to eat anything. So can I just get a show of hands? How many people here are actually teachers? Oh, fantastic, there's heaps of you. Okay, so hi, I'm Thea. This is my first conference talk. So I apologize in advance for talking too fast and finishing in 15 minutes. I was going to do a live demo of creating a lesson, but when I tried in an earlier test, my computer decided that being both plugged into a projector and still having a functioning mouse was just too much to handle. So static slides it is. Anyway, about me. I'm a recent graduate of Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence. I went to university in Scotland at the University of Edinburgh, and I felt really behind when I started because unlike all the kids from the UK, I'd never done programming in school. So when I came back to Australia, even though I have no formal teaching training, I decided to jump headfirst into running after-school clubs to teach kids to code. And these past 2 terms, I've been teaching my Year 8 students Python. The main tool I've been using is the PyCharm Educational Edition by JetBrains. So, what's this talk about? There's been a lot said on the subject of teaching people how to program. There have been some great talks and articles on what language you should use, why it should be Python, the sorts of material you should be teaching, but this is a talk for when you've finished doing that. You've decided you want your kids to know Python, you want them to learn about data types and variables, functions, loops, but I know personally, none of that was the hard bit. There's so much material out there, so many lesson plans and project ideas. What was hard was how should I set up a programming environment for kids? They usually can't access the command prompt. So when I was younger, I wanted to be able to program, but I was too intimidated by what I needed to install, how to set up my computer. Nothing worked for me straight out of the box. I know now we're really lucky to have websites you can learn to code at, but they have their limitations, and at some point you need to install something. So this is about what I installed. The software I use, PyCharm Educational. So this talks about how you can use it to teach, how you can create your own lessons, use other people's lessons, some of the pros and cons to using this particular tool as opposed to others. It's aimed at anyone interested in teaching Python, whether you're an experienced programmer or not. I've tried not to make it too techy. Okay, what is PyCharm? It's an IDE, which is an integrated development environment. Basically software for helping you write software. It's a tool to help you create Python projects that assist you with writing, compiling, and running code. It has syntax and error highlighting, so it shows you where you've made mistakes and how you might fix them. It has code completion tools, kind of like the predictive text on your phone. It has version control integration if you want to get your students using Git, which I recommend. And overall, it's just quite a popular IDE in the Python community. And it also has a Python console which you can use, which is great for getting around those school restrictions on using command prompts. The Educational Edition is all that. It's completely free, it's open source, it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it has additional tools for educators. Namely, there are 2 new types of projects, one for creating and one for taking fill in the missing code type exercises. So, how to get started with PyCharm Educational. You can get your lovely IT staff to install Python 2.7 or 3.4 and the PyCharm Educational Edition on school computers or student laptops. In fact, I'm pretty sure with the Windows version of PyCharm, it actually installs Python for you. So if it's on kids' own laptops, it's pretty much a one-click install. It's very easy. Second of all, if you will be writing your own lessons, you have to open PyCharm on your computer, go to the settings, plugins, and tick Course Creator for PyCharm Educational. For some reason, that's off by default. And with that, you're actually all ready to go. So there are 2 types of projects you can create with students, educational and pure Python. So let's look at educational first. This is what it looks like from the student's point of view. They go create new project, select educational, choose what version of Python they're going to be using. And then they have the option of selecting what course to take. The courses in the drop-down menu are ones that have been created by other people and uploaded to the official JetBrains Git repository. Currently, there's a beginner's course, one on logging, on ciphers, and on unit testing. As you can see, there aren't really too many that are actually published on the official one. There are more floating around the web. But yeah, it's a fairly new piece of software, but JetBrains are trying to encourage people to create courses by running competitions. One recently ended. Alternatively, you can click those 3 little dots next to it and select a course from a file. So if you create a course, you can put it on the student drive and they can access it. All right, so say we've decided to do the course on logging. I'll just kind of take you through the interface. So the top left, we have a list of all the lessons in this particular course and the tasks in each lesson. Below that's a description of the course and a progress bar. One of my main gripes with this software is it's a little squished, but you actually can hide most windows. So on the top right, we have the task text. This gives us information. What do we need to do to complete this particular task, any functions we might need to use. And note that by clicking that little arrow next to task text, it hides it. I took way too long to figure that out and kept complaining when the text was too long and I couldn't see any of the code, and I felt really stupid. But yes, below that is the code that we need to edit. So see the blue boxes? That tells us which bits we need to change. You can click on any of those blue boxes and click on the light bulb, and it gives you a hint about what you need to do in that particular bit. Okay, so we've finished replacing the highlighted text with our answers, and you click the tick button to run and check our code. And congratulations. You click the arrow to go to the next task, and as you can see, our progress bar has gone up. It's very exciting, and kids go mad for it. I made a course, and I accidentally made an error in one of the testing files, so no one could get it to pass the test, even though they had the answer I was looking for. You would have thought I'd just killed their dog or something. Not that devastating, maybe, but they were really annoyed that they couldn't get a perfect progress bar. It's somehow very motivating. Okay, so everything's going along fine. Then you run it and you've got an error. If you don't get it right, it gives you a hint for what you need to change and highlights the boxes that you've gotten wrong. What I love about this system is that it enables kids to go at their own pace. So one of the issues I found with teaching after school clubs is that every student comes in at a different level. So instead of leaving half the kids bored and the other half lost, they work through what they can, ask for additional help when they need it, and I don't have to check every single one of their answers. It also reveals areas where everyone doesn't quite get it, usually when I haven't explained things very well, and then I can go over it with the whole class, maybe write an extra lesson on it next week. So now we get to the exciting bit, which is making your own lessons. I realize a lot of teachers probably won't have time to do this. It takes me the better part of a weekend, but it's not such a bad thing to do it anyway. Once you have made a few courses, it gets easier and then you can reuse them. And I highly recommend it. I have so much fun writing terrible jokes for the kids to not get in my courses. So yes, you give it a name, a description, and you're set. So here is one I made earlier, a lesson we did on the string data type. So projects, as we saw in the student setting, are divided into lessons and tasks. So in this particular one, I have 4 lessons, one on creating strings, on finding and changing things in strings, on splitting and stripping, and on testing things about strings. The first lesson has 6 tasks, and each task has an answer file, an HTML file for the text, and a test file. So here, I hate to shout, but I must stress now, if you are writing lessons, plan them out before you make them. PyCharm Educational currently does not support refactoring of files. You can't change the order lessons are in without manually going into each file and copying and pasting it into another one. And try not to delete lessons, it screws things up. It's a massive pain, and it's one I really hope that they're going to fix in the next version. Well, that's what they've promised anyway. And you might think you'll be tricky and just go into your file system and swap them over. No, doesn't like it. I don't know why, but there you go. Plan your lessons. Anyway, so we've got the answer file. This is where you write the code that the students will see, but you write in the answers too. You highlight anything you want the students to change and add a placeholder. And add the placeholder text, so the students will just see you're a dingbat, and if they click on the hint, it will tell them that strings need quotation marks around them, because I found that's the most common error. So make sure you've finished, you write your whole file and then add the placeholders. Otherwise, this happens. You can't go to the next line because you're just stuck in a placeholder forever. It's really annoying. Okay, so in the tasks.html file, you write what you want the kids to read. Hyperlinks, bold, and breaks are the only HTML that really works, but I think that's plenty. Also, I'm not sure if other teachers find this, but kids often don't even really read what you've written anyway. They'll skim over it, they'll skip to the last line where it's telling them what to do, then get really frustrated when they don't know how to do it, even though it was written in the second sentence. But I digress. The tests file. See on the left, there, kind of bad resolution, but there's a file called test helper. That contains all the different methods you can use for testing. You can check what they wrote in the placeholder and also what the output was when they ran their code. Just note, it converts everything to strings, which is kind of annoying. But it also runs the bunch of common tests, which are things like, did they edit the file? Is the file empty? Did they just delete all the placeholders? And when you're done, you right-click on the project and generate a course archive. This is the file that you send to students. So it's just one file you send them to them, and they open it as an educational project. All right, so what sort of lessons does this actually work for? Unfortunately, nothing where you want to use external file input or keep code students have written from one exercise to the next. Reading and writing to files is currently not supported in the educational projects. The best sort of exercises are ones that have a set answer, either very specific syntax they have to use or a very specific output. Then for bigger, more complicated projects, I just use an ordinary project in PyCharm and we work through it as a class. So here are some more examples of lessons I've made. So this particular one had 2 challenges. Learn how to make a computer print the lyrics to 99 bottles and make a higher or lower guessing game. So this is what it looks like in the course creator. This is a task where you have very specific syntax. So I want them to print a list of numbers from 1 to 20 and I want them to use the range function. I want students to write, exactly what I've written. And this is what it looks like from the student point of view. So all the stuff I wrote and then kind of empty code to fill in down the bottom. This is another type of task I like where you have multiple possible answers. So instead I'm just testing their output. So all should be true. And that's what it looks like from the student's point of view. But when you're finished with the constraints of lessons, say you want to be able to keep code they've written without it being all in one big file, it's time to move to a pure Python project. So that's what those look like. You've got your project structure on the left, code editor on the right, the little green arrow button to run. You've got a Python console down the bottom you can use. So here we were creating a virtual pet, learning about classes and objects. Pretty cool. So this is one of the features. When you type in a variable and a full stop, you then get a list of all the methods you can use on it, which is pretty great. Another thing I love is the error highlighting. So Python in general is quite good with their errors. I find they usually make sense and point to the problem, at least for me. For the kids, not so much. the additional information provided by PyCharm is even better. So here, a student has forgotten a colon after the if statement, and we get syntax error, invalid syntax. But if you hover over the squiggly red line, it tells us exactly what's wrong. Colon was expected. It also highlights things that aren't compliant with PEP 8. That's the style guide for Python, not compulsory, but it makes things prettier. And I like that because then my kids have pretty code. But yeah, so one instance in which this has been really helpful, I have a student that's dyslexic. He loves programming, wants to make games, but really struggles because of the constant syntax errors he gets. He always, from one variable to the next, he'll misspell it every time. He has a hard time finding where all these mistakes are. And then we started using PyCharm. Now if he just types the first few letters, it can auto-complete for him. He can pick from a list of functions that he knows will work, and errors are really clearly labeled, so it's much less painful for him. I imagine this would also work well for English as a second language students. Okay, so this is how I use it all in practice. So I have hour-long classes once a week. We start each lesson by recapping what we learnt last week, getting students to answer simple questions. Then I explain whatever new topic we're doing today. Not necessarily all the functions we'll be using, but the key ones, the ones that I find people have most trouble with. Like maybe how to split a string or loop through a list. Then they'll start working on the lesson I've made, which usually takes the rest of the hour. The following week, we work as a class on a big project in pure Python. So after we'd done the lesson on user input, next week we made a magic 8 ball, where students could ask a question and it would return, yes, no, maybe, I don't know. The main problem I have with this is when top students finish a lot earlier than the rest of the class. In that case, I either ask them to help their peers or I make them work on this one lesson I made with really hard maths problems. Okay, so what are the alternatives? We've got online interpreters like labs at Codecademy and Compile Online. They have the advantage of not having to have anything installed on computers. If students are bringing their own laptops, you don't have to set up Python and PyCharm for every single one. You can save your work as a URL and open it again at home. Python Anywhere has some educational thing that's in beta at the moment, so I'll be interested to see what they do with that. But the disadvantages are that they don't always work for every browser because half the kids I have an outdated version of Internet Explorer. Some schools I've been to have shocking internet connections and kids constantly lose their work. And they don't have all the capabilities that an IDE has. So using IPython notebooks seems to be very popular with universities these days. The only problem is, to start it up, you need access to command prompt or terminal. And I haven't been in a school yet that gives their students permission to access that. And probably with good reason, seeing some of the things they get up to. In my last class, when we were making the virtual pets, kids wanted to create a new cryptocurrency called pet coins and then make a freemium game where you have to buy food for your virtual pet in pet coins. And anyone that wants to make a freemium game is kind of a little bit evil in my books. So lastly, there are other IDEs, like, the only ones I've tried are Idle and Eclipse. They're similar to PyCharm, but without half of the functionality, without all the educational stuff, so it's not worth it. So why do I like using PyCharm so much? Sum it up, it's free, it works offline, it's a complete package that does everything you want. And most importantly, my students really love it. When we don't have lessons and we just do regular projects for a while, they complain because they enjoy the lessons so much. Maybe it's all the jokes I put in. And I strongly believe that using the same tools that experienced developers use is the best thing for students. So interactive online educational platforms like Codecademy, they're extremely easy to start with. And that's great, but as soon as you need to make any real projects, anything with more than one file, you're lost. I found PyCharm to be easy enough that kids can pick it up quickly and focus on learning Python rather than learning the editor. And that's what you want when you're learning to program. So you can go here to see some of the courses I've made. They're not all up there. Feel free to download and use them. Half of it probably doesn't make sense, but you can download the whole thing and edit my lessons, make them better, see how they work, or you can just download the course archive and put on your poor students. And yeah, that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for questions now, and if folks can wait for the microphone to capture the questions for the recording, that'd be great.
Hi. So you mentioned earlier on something about GitHub and your students, and I noticed you have a GitHub account. I would be interested to know if you're using GitHub, especially with, did you say year 8s?
Yeah, year 8s. We got it set up last week, so we haven't actually properly used it yet. They've just made accounts. But it's very easy in PyCharm. There's just like a button that says link to your GitHub account, and then a button that says push. And
so what are you planning to do with it?
I guess just teach them how to,
So in the UK, what I'm trying to get at a little bit is that we find with teachers, what they're using it with their students is having like an online portfolio of their work, and then using that to help mark the work because they can see the diff.
Oh yeah.
And see what the changes are.
Yeah,
so.
That's a good idea. So I'm an after-school thing, so it's not graded. It's just for fun. So I haven't really thought too much about how you could use it. If you need to grade stuff, but that would be useful.
Just curious how you started your after-school program.
I just rang a bunch of schools and asked them if they wanted to run a coding club, and this is why I thought it was a good idea and why I'd be okay to do it.
How do you find kids take to just getting text output rather than graphic output?
So we started with Scratch, and they all really love that. So I teach primary school and high school. The primary school kids aren't very impressed by the text output, so we mainly just do Scratch because it's more exciting. But the older kids, the high school kids, they say they prefer Python. But we could start, I don't know, not TK Inter. I don't know what we could start doing for some graphical stuff, but yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry? Yeah, you can do Turtle. Yeah, we've done some stuff in Turtle.
So when you're in Brisbane with this programming club, correct? And it's just at one school, or?
The Gap.
Or sort of like a pair of.
The Gap High, Milton, and Gap State.
Okay, I was just curious because I tried to set up a coding club earlier this year and had a lot of difficulty.
So did I. I rang, maybe 20 schools, and 3 got back to me. So, and that's only because I had connections at all 3 of those schools.
Right. I had one told me that it would be too expensive, even though I said it was free.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So one of the problems that I've seen solved with IPython notebooks is, and one of the problems more generally, is that of a shared environment. So if you're teaching, I've seen this with Spark, for instance. No one's going to have PySpark installed, so you have to go through and teach everyone how to install PySpark and then how to run it. Whereas if you've got this shared environment, it's all already done. Do you know if the educational edition has the IPython notebook integration, or have you tried shared notebooks?
I don't think it does. I haven't tried any shared stuff at the moment. We just work, individually, because I couldn't get IPython notebooks running on this particular school's computers.
Cool. So my question is about the PyCharm tests and activities that you wrote. How prescriptive are they? Are you like with the boxes that the kids have to replace and fill in? Are you testing that they filled it in with exactly something, or are you testing that the code works at the end?
So it depends on what I want
Okay.
So for that one where I want them to learn how to use range, it has to say range from 1 to 10. But for most of them, I'm testing what output they get.
Gotcha. So the sort of the text output should be this, and then
Yep.
it's this.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Hey, so one of the problems I ran into trying to teach kids using an IDE is that an IDE would almost have too much going on. There would be too much in the interface.
Yeah.
Did you encounter that issue with PyCharm, and if so, how did you work around it?
I actually haven't experienced that problem yet. Our first
sorry,
class, we said, there are a lot of functions. You will not need to use anything. The ones you have to look at are the button that says play or run. This is the code editor, and this is how you make a new file. And so we kind of only looked at that. They don't use most of the functionality of it, but then again, neither do I when I use it, really.
Cool. Thank you, Thea.